Welcome to Keyword Studios digital event. Great to have you all here. Today we have our guys from Sound Lab who will be joined by guest speakers from the Loop Squad for a live panel discussion on recording in the closet, the art of pivot. Before we get started, I'd like to draw your attention to the side of your screen where you should see a Q&A tab. If you have any questions throughout today's session, please place them here. In order to keep to the time allocated, we will answer all questions at the end during our Q&A section. Now, let me introduce you to our moderator for today, Debbie Gonzalez. Debbie is Senior Producer at Sound Lab, a Keyword Studio, and is also in charge of our business development. Debbie studied music production and engineering at Berklee College. She moved to LA and began producing music and sound design for hundreds of projects with top composers and sound designers in the industry. In 2014, she partnered with acclaimed sound pioneer Scott Gershin. In 2018, they joined the Sound Lab at Keyword Studios. Together, Scott and Debbie have brought together a team of top creative and technical talent to produce and implement the most immersive sound experiences spanning across multiple mediums of games, TV, film, just to mention a few. Debbie, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce today's panel.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm super excited to be here with this amazing group of people. It's going to be an interesting discussion about creating the authentic and diversified sound of women in the 1970s for the recently released FX production of Mrs. America, now streaming on Hulu. So this panel that we have tonight has an amazing amount of credits between them. So I'm going to jump right in and introduce the supervising sound editor and sound designer on Mrs. America, Scott Gershin. Scott is also the creative and managing director of Sound Lab and is an award-winning sound designer who's been active in the film and gaming community for over 2 decades. With such films as Pacific Rim, Hellboy 2, Chronicles of Riddick, Team America, Shrek, Star Trek, and American Beauty, as well as major games such as Gears of War, Epic Mickey, Resident Evil, Final Fantasy, as well as newly released titles for Riot Games such as Valorant and Legends of Runeterra, and most recently, Toys for Bob, Activision, the soon-to-be released on October 2nd, Crash Bandicoot. He has an impressive number of awards and nominations, and also has lent his talents to numerous projects that have won both DICE and Oscar awards. So welcome, Scott Gershin.
Wow.
And next, I'd like to introduce from the Loop Squad, Patty Connolly. Patty is a voiceover actress with extensive experience in group ADR, beginning with 8 years on various Spellings productions, including Beverly Hills 90210 and Charmed. And Patty is joining us from her closet. So, hi, Patty.
Hello.
And next we have Mark Sussman from Loop Squad. Mark has made a name for himself in the looping world by specializing in voice matching, dialects, and efforts. He began his acting career at a young age, guest starring in numerous television series such as 21 Jump Street and Beverly Hills 90210. He's matched the voices of everyone from Brad Pitt to Brad Garrett and has mastered dialects from standard British to Farsi. Welcome, Mark.
Good to be here.
Not in a closet, but
Yeah.
Still with us. Good. And last but certainly not least, the lovely Erin Miles, the newest member of the Loop Squad. Erin began her acting career at a young age in Toronto, Canada, performing in live theater and small roles in local television and film. She eventually made her way to Los Angeles, where she quickly found the Groundlings Theater and her passion for sketch comedy and improv. As a member of the comedy group Davidson, she wrote and starred in digital shorts for National Lampoon, Super Deluxe, and College Humor, and performed live shows to rave reviews at the San Francisco Comedy Festival and the Chicago Sketch Fest, to name a few.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome in.
Thank you.
So for those of you who have not seen the show, Mrs. America, yet, Mrs. America explores the historical movement to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment and the opposition to that movement led by conservative Phyllis Schlafly. So before we dive into hearing about how all of you contributed and did such a masterful job at creating the sound of women and the 1970s for Mrs. America, we're going to play a trailer.
I am not against women. I am not against women working outside the home. But what I am against is the women's liberation movement.
Who the hell is Phyllis Schlafly?
We need to get the word out quickly. We want the right to be a mother, the right to be a wife. The liberals want to create a sex-neutral feminist totalitarian nightmare.
Do you know what you're saying has no basis in fact?
Our movement is about fighting the oppression of all women.
We do not want housewives thinking that we are against them.
We are against them.
Revolutions are messy. How long are we supposed to wait? How much time do we give people to adapt to change? Or am I the only one who's so fucking tired of waiting?
This fight is not about equality. It's about power. And I'm just getting started.
We are a political movement, not a sorority.
So now we're not gonna have people we disagree with participate?
We don't get to decide how the battle lines are drawn.
When did you get so mean?
I have let you run around this country with your cause.
It's our cause.
Did you really think there'd be no casualties?
Why would God put this fire in me if he didn't want me to act on it?
Very nice. Sounds great. So let's start from the beginning with Scott Gershin. As the supervising sound designer and sound editor, tell me what services you provided and what was your responsibility on the show?
Thanks. So, my job on the show was to put all of the audio together. That includes all the dialogue, all the backgrounds, the Foley, shoot all the ADR, the Waller group, all the sound effects, but basically to give it its audio signature. How's it going to sound? What approaches do we want to take? There are many options. So I hired a whole bunch of amazing talent on the Foley side, on the Waller group side, which was important to me, as well as great dialogue people and effects people. And then we needed to take that, put it into a mix, which and then air it.
That's great. So early on in the project, you're getting involved and you're starting to see some of the footage from the show about women in the 1970s and coming to the conclusion that you're going to have to create the sound of women from the 1970s. And not only that, but how they navigated the pros and cons of the issues of the day, such as the struggle to pass the equal rights movement among numerous other issues. So what was your thought process and how sound would play a role in the project?
Well, I had to do a lot of research to begin with. I happened to be living in New York at that time. And I wanted to be able to capture what the sound of the 70s was in the different places we went to. I didn't want to do a stereotypical, I didn't want Southerners to always have, Southern accents and East Coast all talking like New York. There's many different facets to it. And what's amazing job is that the lead actresses really did a wonderful job at trying to portray the different characters, because these are real events with real people in real time. So at that point, I wanted to make sure that, when we're looking at Shirley Chisholm, making sure that that sounded correct for the way they spoke in the 1970s. What were the things they were talking about? What were the issues? We worked really closely with Davi, who's the showrunner, as well as Anna and Ryan, who were the directors, as well as picture cutters. There's a lot of people that were involved. and trying to capture where do we put up forward, where do we go back, how are the guys going to act? Are they just all dogs? How is it, what was natural? And we wanted to make sure we weren't lampooning anything because it was just too easy to do that. So we wanted to make sure we found the right voice and the right style for the show. And sometimes the goal was to sit back and let the lead actresses do their thing, and then we engage. So it's always about what you want to do, and also negative space, where to sit back, where to go quiet. In episode 8, where Alice goes on her crazy drug adventure, how far did we want to go? And we experimented with a lot of different styles, but we wanted to stay true to the era, to the style of the show that we wanted, and try to make it obviously that nobody actually knows what we do, because ultimately it's an illusion, and we want people just to buy it, to make believe they were transported to that era in that location.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So was there a lot of research involved in understanding what those voices were going to be? Talk a little bit about the process you went through to capture the authentic sound of the times and the research involved.
There was a lot. We had researchers. Davi obviously had researched a lot and had some ideas of what the event said and what they didn't say. We constantly were adjusting, like, do we talk about abortion rights in this episode? Oh, wait a minute. No, we can't. They didn't talk about that yet. So sometimes we had to back up and go forward again. What were we talking about in different eras? We had a lot of speeches that we actually took from events. So when you look at the show, many times there's a big convention hall in the other room. And we re-recorded a lot of the actors saying the exact same lines. We basically transcribed it. So we wanted to stay as much as possible true to the era. We did a lot of research, both myself and the folks at Loop Squad. We were constantly looking at YouTubes and trying to see what was the tone, what was the vernacular. And we wanted to try to give voices to each of the groups, not only conservative and liberal, but we wanted to go, who's New York, who's DC, who is Chicago, who's in Illinois, who's in the South, and try to stay true to that with the tools that we had available.
Yeah. So Patty, question for you. So Scott referenced Walla earlier. So can you tell us, what is Walla?
Everybody asks that. Walla is when you watch a television show or a movie, all those, the easiest way to explain is all those extras in the background don't talk. They mime. And so we have to fill their voices for them because they want to mic the principals so they get clear audio tracks. And if you had everybody talking in the background, you might not be able to hear the principal actors. And they might not be saying what we want them to say. So we can actually change sometimes a story point by how the characters are acting in the background. So we fill their voices. And it's really easy to do if they're far away, but when they're really close to the camera, featured extras, sometimes we have to try to figure out what they're saying and fill their mouths, and so that it looks natural. But a lot of times they're not saying anything. They might just go. So we have to try to fill that voice for them with something that pertains to the scene or the time period, or the country they're in. So we will fill that in. If they're in Thailand, we have to get people who can speak Thai. If they're in Hong Kong, it might be Cantonese because that's the main Chinese language. So we're filling that background. But Walla also includes any announcements, hospital announcements, airport announcements, a pilot making an announcement on a plane, So we'll fill that in. We'll also, while it includes efforts. So if an actor and actress is fighting in the background, sometimes even the principals, if they don't want to do the efforts, we'll try to do their efforts, especially the people fighting in the background. So if we have a bunch of ninjas fighting each other, then we have to get people who can do those efforts. So what it really covers is everything that the principals aren't doing. And I think that's a good way to explain it, Mark, right?
Yeah. You hit it on the nose. Now I know what we're doing. Now I know what we're doing.
People think that the extras are doing it, but it's really not. The extras are hired for their look, and then we are hired for the voice.
And like what Scott was saying too, it's they have control. When we go, basically, so the actors go on stage and we improvise to picture. So the screen is in front of us and we have a microphone. Scott records us, and then he has control about how much walla, or how many voices want to be heard, or what voices want to be heard. And Scott could expand on this, what mics he wants to use. So we would do our research before coming on the stage, whether it's because we're not doctors, we're not policemen, we don't know, we have never really been on a crime scene before. So, Patty and I would give the actors information of what's needed for the particular episode, and they would do research, and they would know all these lingos and all this jargon, what to say, as if they were a doctor, as if they were a crime scene specialist or a construction worker. So it's the best way for the sound designers to have control, thinking, how much music, how much walla needs to be put in, and it's just texture. And it's funny because, when you see it, when we watch a movie before we go on, you could see that it's bare, but a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell until you hear the wall and you hear all the other ambiance that's in the background. Then you understand why that's such an integral part of sound.
Right. Very interesting.
And I'll also say what walla groups actually are known by two names: a loop group, because they're looping, and a walla group. And the word walla came from when a loop group does vocals, a lot of times they have to do it in such a way that it can be used in multiple languages. Now, Mrs. America was a little bit different because there were certain things we wanted to keep, and we wanted to stay true to what was happening in America. But in the past, what they would do is say the word walla. They go walla, 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 walla. And that's, in the old days, that's why they called them walla groups, because they would just use the word walla and use their voice to inflect emotion rather than specific words. But it's all evolved since then.
Yeah, and especially, I was just going to say, especially how productions are so detail oriented, and with 5.1, and you hear everything. I mean, sometimes I'm in the theater and watching one of our shows or movies that we've done, and I'm like, oh, I just heard such and such, or I heard, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So question for Mark and Patty, sort of together. So I believe at the start of Mrs. America, I remember Scott had you guys over to the studio and you looked through a bunch of material together and started discussing the various potential approaches. So can you tell us a little bit about how that worked and how you kind of got started with the approach to the walla group or loop group for this project?
Well, we met with Scott and discussed with him, because he was our liaison between the creator, Davi, and the producers, of what they were looking for, what the sound was that they wanted, or the story point that they wanted to get across. So meeting with him gave us an insight into what they wanted. And it really was a feeling of reality at that time, not what you imagine. You want to feel that reality. So we watched like clips from that time period of the speeches that those particular women were giving. We also talked about the makeup of the group. We wanted women who didn't fake the time period, who really embodied the housewife or the liberal. And believe it or not, today people have that persona. They either lived it or they are close to living it. So we wanted to feel real. So we talked about that with Scott, of not getting women. Yes, you want actresses who could do both, but we wanted people who really either lived it or felt that, or their mothers lived it. So one was embodying real women who really embodied that. And then how are we going to share Scott's knowledge of what he wanted and what the producers wanted with the actresses? So it was like telling Scott, this is how we approach it. If you have anything to add, we want you to add. So we would episodically give each group of actresses that were working that episode research and give them YouTube clips so they can watch what was happening at that time period, like when Shirley Chisholm gave her speech at the convention. We wanted them to understand it and feel it, so they came to the stage prepared. So it really is getting people who embodied it, who understood it, who had the research, who went beyond and did more research than what we even gave them. And so that was talking to Scott and throwing out names of people he knew, throwing out people we knew, why we felt they were the right person for this job. And so it really was a collaborative effort with Scott so that he would feel comfortable with the actresses we were bringing, and what the producers and he were trying to create in sound and bringing that together. Because he was relying on us to find the talent, and I was relying on him to give me the research and a pathway to the producers so that we would give him what he wanted.
Right.
And I'll throw something in there is that, when I look at the sound of, I'm going to call it even crowds, because it goes somewhere between loop group and crowds. The biggest issue we had was you could not find a library of women in any sound effects library. There were a couple singles, but there were no mass sound effects crowd libraries. So what I had to do, not only do traditional loop group, but I also had to take a loop group and turn them into a sound effect. And for me, I listen, it's just the way I hear things. To me, everything is music. So I looked at the liberal bass, and the liberal bass was higher pitched, was a younger group of more college age people. So we took actresses that had a little higher pitch, and I put them more for the liberal side. For the conservative side, there were a little bit older women, and I looked and I listened to the different actresses, and I wanted them to be a little more altos, less sopranos, and a little bit lower pitched. So they would then embody, almost like background singers, a feel and a vibe and a tone, so that when it sat behind the principal actresses, you may not always hear the words, but you always hear the tone. And when we went to Shirley Chisholm, excuse me, I know it may not be politically correct, but I didn't want a bunch of white people trying to do black voices. And not only that, I didn't want black vernaculars from 2020 being used in 1970, because it was a different way people spoke. So then we had to try to find actresses that really embodied what that would have been for the people surrounding Shirley Chisholm. And if you notice, the principal actresses did such a great job at capturing that. I felt that we need to do the same with the Waller Group, with the tone, and to get the spirit and the vibe of what those people would have sounded like as a crowd of people.
And that's basically, go on.
I was going to say, fair to say then that the performances of the actors were very inspiring to you in terms of creating the sound as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I shot a lot of the principal ADR, so I've got a chance to see the actresses go from who they are personally to transform into those characters. And I saw the research that had been done. I had spoken to Davi, and I've seen the research that Kate did, and all these different people to try to embody what did this real person sound like? And they put so much attention to detail that instead of doing a traditional Walla group in a certain way, I really wanted to go that extra distance, to go that extra level. And we kept pushing, and every time we would use a group, the next episode, do we want to use those people? How about we use those people? Okay, this episode is about Shirley. This is episodes about Alice. Each one kind of had their own character. We had group one with lesbians. We didn't want everybody to sound like guys. Also, even with the guys, we had one actor who had a natural New York accent rather than trying to fake a New York accent. There's something just honest about it. And when you hear it a little bit, you go, I know what that sounds like.
Yeah. And Mark, you were going to say?
No, I was just going to say, basically, when Scott was telling you how he breaks down and talks about what type of voices he needs and stuff, but that's almost exactly what a conversation with us was like. I mean, he was talking about like how he is so specific. A lot of projects that we work on, sometimes the sound designers aren't as specific. And, I think if Patty could concur, we actually learned a lot from Scott, the details, the sound he wants to show the difference between like the liberals and the conservatives and the difference justification to both of those different groups. So I thought it was really interesting, and just to see how he works and how he wants to show how it differs from each group. So, yeah.
And I'll say, to the credit to the amazing actresses and actors in the Loop Squad, when we all got together, we said, okay, can we get like 30 people? And they're like, no. And they said, we originally budgeted like 3. And we're like, no. So we had to find a place that made sense with the show. I had talked to them early on about recording people on the set on wild takes. They were moving too fast. They weren't able to do it. So then the onus went back on us to try to recreate that. And, it was a little white knuckle at the beginning, because there were times we had like 8 people, 6 women, 2 guys, or 8 women and 2 guys, or 3 guys. It was a lot of women. And try to make them sound like 100 people.
Oh, yeah.
It's this was more like a feature film.
Yeah.
But the budget was an episodic television budget. And
so we just made it work within the budget constraints.
It's hard. So it takes a lot more effort with finding talent that can do multiple things, to a lot more time on the stage to do multiple tracks. So we could layer and layer and layer, so it would feel like it was dense and thick, but not soupy. So what's happening with new media, or what, you can't really call it television anymore, because it's not television. It's streaming. It's new media, high video on demand, high, what's winning awards today is not what was winning awards 20 years ago. So everything's more like a feature film now. So, but the budgets haven't grown to match the project that's being done. So here we are going, oh, you have 8 people in this episode, but you have a Democratic convention in Miami in the early 70s, and it's got to be at least, a couple hundred people. So, and we didn't record any of them, so we need to fill it.
As she laughed.
So that's the challenge.
I remember when I was asking, I said, okay, great, no problem. First said, can we record on set? No. Can I get more people? No. Then it was like, oh, okay. Oops. And I've been challenged with that through my career. I mean, it goes all the way back for even when I did The Doors. I mean, I grabbed a bunch of Loop Group and a fraternity and sorority, and I brought 200 people and we had a kegger. So all the crowds that are singing along with The Doors is us at the Sony scoring stage.
Yeah.
or Book of Life, where I actually rented a bull ring and grabbed 100 Mexicans.
But don't you think, Scott, it became even more challenging when COVID hit, and now we were forced inside?
Yes, I think it was. Luckily, it was episode 9, though it was. Yeah, it was all challenging because I remembered getting a note on one of the convention scenes, and they were like, it only sounds like about 500 people. We need to sound like 5,000 people. And I'm going, wait a second. You think it sounds like 500 people? That's like 12 people. Yeah. I'm sitting going, wow, woohoo,
and that's when Scott said, "Thank God, Mark Sussman's on the stage."
So, getting back to the recording sessions themselves, you mentioned a little bit yourself, Scott. You like to. There's some in the time I've worked with you. I know that you like to try new things and have really creative ideas about, thinking outside the box and doing things the way people, don't think about doing it. And so one of the things that I found interesting, I'd love you to talk about how the miking for the Waller group and how you set that up and how you had, how you did all that.
So normally a lot of times ADR stages and loop groups, they use a microphone called a shotgun mic, which is very narrow. It only hears whoever's in front of it, not on the sides. So this way you don't hear the room, and it could be anywhere. I did a different approach. I wanted a very specific room. It was the old Tadio room. And it was an ADR stage, which is the size of a big theater, almost a mixed stage. And I wanted that specific room because I could do things with the acoustics. The next thing I wanted to do was not to get rid of the whole shotgun concept. We had one, but then I brought my own mics in. I had mics behind the actors, in front of the actors, on the wide side of the actresses and actors. And then at that point, I can capture the room as I needed it in any given take. Not only that, then I got a little weird, and I started moving the actors around because I'm thinking like an orchestra, like a choir.
That was weird.
That was
very weird.
And I know that there were actresses and actors that wanted to kill me because if anyone stood out, I would go, "You're standing out. Do it again," because I could hear it wasn't blending correctly. So for me, I'm hearing it acoustically. So in an episode, I may want it to sound like a room. When we get to the convention halls, I have the actors like facing the walls, 1 foot away from the wall, away from the mics, or they were in the middle of the room, or they were running in circles in the room, all these different things that would give a different flavor. And one of the ways that I think I was able to pull off size is every take had a different acoustical footprint. So then I started combining it because when you're basically in a coliseum or a big room, not everybody's standing 5 feet away from you. There's people that are 40 feet away from you. So the people that are facing the wall talking, well, those are the people 200 feet away. Now I could use acoustics of the room as a tool, like a choir, and put it together. So when I combine it and put these in the surrounds, this in the center, these left and right, now when you start putting them together, you start getting size. And then I could do the normal tricks that we all do. But I have to admit, we used not that much reverb. We started to, and it just smeared it and made it all muddy. So I would say probably 90% of the time, you're actually just hearing the room.
So I got to ask Erin, honestly, what did you think? Were you like in your head, were you saying to yourself, this man's crazy?
Yes, absolutely. No, in a really fun, loving way, though. We even had, we did have a point when I know we all sort of looked at each other and were like, okay, we're going to do this way. Normally, in a typical Waller group, you don't want to make any other noises, just your vocals. You have to be careful of what you're doing with your hands or your clothes. At one point, Scott literally handed us paper because we were doing a scene in Phyllis's
in the church
kitchen,
when they're all,
when they're all folding all the pamphlets. and he just wanted that really like authentic sound. And normally that would be a total no-no, but we were all folding paper, passing them around while we were talking. So it was just sort of a messy, I don't know if he ended up using that, but it was a really
All of it.
fun
Yep,
way.
absolutely.
Oh, good. It was just a really fun way to not be so like locked into what I'm doing with my voice by itself and sort of embody what it was that he wanted. And so, yeah, he was crazy, but there was some method to his madness.
There always is, but I just,
yes.
So, Scott, can you talk a little bit about your approach to, and maybe all of you can participate in this, the approach to casting the actors, and you had mentioned something about a concept of how you think of the actors as background singers. Scott, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. Loop groups can be somewhat controversial, sort of, in that if you don't get the right actors, it has a sound. Mm-hmm. And people, they're not acting, they're just talking. And sometimes I wanted people to act, to be there, to see the screen, to see what they were thinking, and to act. And sometimes loop group is shot but not used. And I just think differently of how I think of Waller groups. I love Waller groups. I want to make sure that, first of all, Loop Squad did an amazing job. So all the things that I would say, we never even discussed. Like, there always seemed to be somebody that does Bart Simpson voice and somebody's got a deep voice. And when I've got, we talked about that early on. And I said, then you do, all these different scenes and you still hear that, the mouse is back up there and the speaker down there. And you always hear that one voice just sticks out and it doesn't work. So to me, it's got to be, I do think of it as background singing, where a lot of times we're going to play it in such a way where you don't, look, even the opening, where Phyllis comes out and she's doing the bathing suit side, we have a couple men shout outs. But we needed there to be an energy in the room. When during the debates, when the women are reacting like, no, we're not girls, we're women. And all of a sudden there has to be a certain anger. You're not always hearing the words, the individual words, especially when the principal actresses are acting, but you need to hear that emotion. And it becomes a group. It almost like when you put all the actors together, they become a single actor. And they become a single voice. And that voice may be words, but always emotion. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they stoned? What are they? And you kind of get that vibe.
Right. So I think we have some pictures from some of these sessions. We can pull some of those up. Maybe you guys can comment and tell us a little bit about what was going on during some of these shots. Well, that's not from the wall.
Oh yeah, that one is.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, that's the Waller group.
So there's the group. So what's going on? Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, we're moving through them really quick. So
there's everybody in there.
Oh, and there's a booth.
That's our booth.
Okay. They're just flying through that.
Yeah.
Hey.
I think she did it as a video.
There we go.
I know. Yeah, I think so. You saw, I'll say this and then let other people speak. You saw the actresses facing the screen because they have to see what's happening on there to understand what's needed in any given moment within the scene. If you saw them standing in a line, that was me doing some of my weird, placement stuff. Yeah, and then the other one, we can talk about the other one later as far as
you just saw how big, when Scott's talking about how big that stage is. I mean, the stage was huge.
It's in the pictures now.
Yeah, and there was so much room to play. And and then you see the screen and the mic, and that's what the actors improvised to picture. But I just want to chime in for a sec, because Scott is such an actor's sound designer. He just understands the actor and what's needed to get a performance out of people. And I have to chime in with Aaron, handing out papers, that's unheard of. Loop Group, especially, you can't make any exterior, like other sounds, but handing out papers and Scott said, I have mics in the back, I have mics in the front, I have mics in the sound. So don't worry about facing the mic. Just talk to people, move around. You're at a party, say hello to people. It got us out. It made us not aware of ourselves, but it put us into the moment. So we didn't have to think about where the mic was. Doing all these physicalities, really, it felt like we were there. But we don't have any pictures of that.
It also gave a sense of movement. If you just face the mic the whole time, your voice is very one-dimensional. Where if we were moving our bodies up and down in a chair, like you're working in Phyllis's house, stuffing envelopes, and then you get up, there's a different sound on the mic in your voice. You hear that movement. Or when you turn away from the mic, you hear that movement. And that's important. And because Scott did what most sound supervisors don't do, he had multiple mics, then they could pick it up in different areas. So,
and then we had freedom to play. I mean, Scott would say that, just play, guys. So,
and I'll say, it's interesting. So Luke, when people are acting, they can do one of two things. They can either talk to each other, like two people talk to each other, or as we joked around, we talk to your imaginary friend. So now all of a sudden you've got 15 people talking. But what I loved with both Patty and Aaron and Mark, we would constantly go, wait a second, now you're no longer phrasing like a conversation. You're not allowing any breath. So when people talk, they actually don't talk over each other. Somebody talks. It's a bit of a dance, a musicality to it. Somebody talks, somebody answers, somebody talks. And I remember numerous times, Patty would go, hey, everybody. No, talk to somebody. Don't just talk to the room. Because if you're the only one talking, you're never pausing to hear how somebody else is going to answer you.
I mean, that's the one. Yeah. I was just going to say, that's the one thing that we always stress in Loop Group, because you think you're a voiceover actor, your job is to talk. The experienced loopers know how to listen, and it just makes more of an organic sound. And we say that, said, hey, if you guys pair up and you have a conversation, even if there's a long pause, even if there's an uncomfortable pause, let that breathe, because it's natural.
I think it's hard though for people because they brought their research in, they're ready to share it. They've probably memorized the first thing they're going to say because it is improv. Is that the right word?
No, it's improv with the French accent.
It's improv. And so they're nervous because it's a period piece. They might not say that normally in today's world, so they're ready to go. And if somebody else starts in your little pair and you don't know what they're going to say, you're like, and so they just start saying what they memorized. And it takes an experienced actor, actress to really listen to what the other person says and be able to reply naturally. And that comes with experience, that comes with knowing your research. And you'll get your chance to say your one line that you memorized, and then the other person will get their chance to respond. But a lot of times they would both come out with their line they memorized and they'd be on top of each other. So sometimes it takes a bit of, hey, that's great. Okay, let's do it again.
Well, even as silly as the museum party had a density to it. And then Shirley Chisholm's party was like, hey, what's it? It's a very much slower kind of vibe. And it was just talking. And it's, I'm thinking of a rhythm. It's almost a swing. And the other one's going like this. So I hear rhythms of speech, because to me, again, it's all music. And so it's frantic. And even as silly as, and even where we tried to get the men running into the convention hall and the women freaking out, and there was a certain chaos.
Yes.
And, and if people are just shouting, it just has a sound. So I tried something, and that was I had two circles, one going in one direction and an inner circle going in the opposite direction. And we were the actors and actors were kind of jogging. But what was great was in that part where it was like, there's a certain emotion and energy. It just played wonderfully.
Yeah.
It just didn't feel like people shouting stagnant, but had movement to it. And it made my job easy so that I could lay it in, and it's just right.
That's right. So let's pivot, pun intended, to the second half. Not the second half, but let's talk about fast forward. March hits. You've recorded and captured the voices for episodes 1 through 8. When the city of Los Angeles.
There we go.
Yeah, right. There you go. Right. So this is why Patty's in her closet.
March 19th.
That's where she was. 19th. Yeah.
March 19th, the lockdown started.
and it was interesting.
We've still got episode 9 to do. You've got the finale to finish. So tell me what was going on in your minds. How are you going to get this done? How are you going to pull it all together?
We had a date for episode 9. We were still playing around with how we wanted the last episode to play. We decided to push the Walla Group session later. We canceled it twice.
Well, didn't we think that we would only be locked down for maybe?
Well, no. I'm talking about locked picture. We're not even locked down.
Yeah.
But we talked about locked picture. And we said, you know what? Let's do it near the end, right before we mix. Because I don't want to shoot it and then shoot it again. Let's just do it once. So we said, fine. We pushed it down the road. Then a pandemic hit. And then we were like, okay.
That's true.
And then the room that we had closed down.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay. So everything I was doing, all the strategies, the room, the way the mics were, gone. So then it was all of us got together and we frantically talked, not that frantically, but then I think Mark, Aaron, and Patty started discussing. They knew certain actors that either we had worked with or new ones who had recording rigs at home. Now, everybody had a different rig with a different mic. So in my audio mind, that was very interesting.
Not only did they have a different mic, some people, it happens so fast.
Yeah.
March 19th. And yes, we did push until we could get a locked picture. And by then COVID was here and we locked down March 19th. It happened so fast that you couldn't buy equipment. You didn't have time to set up equipment. You didn't know where you were going to record if you did have equipment. I remember calling a company out of state and begging them to please send me some equipment that I needed.
It's hard to get,
You couldn't go anywhere. And then it was, where do you record? And most people think they are going to record in the smallest room in their house, which is usually a bathroom. And that's the worst place because there's no
I told everybody, go to the closet.
And so it became this overwhelming. Not only do they have different mics, different soundproofing, but different software to record on. And not everybody could always record at the same time because now
a lot of people didn't know audio
at home, right? A lot of
they
people
didn't have any
want to.
I was
Everybody's
say
was different because now all of a sudden spouses were working from home and trying to social distance for phone calls and noise, and kids were home screaming, and dogs and airplanes, and we just were like
we, like, Aaron could chime in on this. So we're not sound engineers. We had to learn Pro Tools. Like, we literally we had a 2-hour tutorial. We went, and you kind of saw it in this quick picture video, built a homemade booth with PVC pipes and blankets. And, we learned Pro Tools, which is so important because all our, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I think that the key to, I think, survival in this was not just to pivot, but to pivot really quickly.
Yeah.
I think the people who sort of like did the best, functioned the best, were the people who, the moment that it locked down, people went, okay, what do I need to do? And I think that was the biggest lesson for at least me, was like, okay, when this kind of thing happens, you've got to be ready to learn new things in a day and just kind of go for it, because otherwise you are going to be left behind, unfortunately, you know?
I think that booth was built the next day. Mike's came like literally 3 days later, before the big rush. Pro Tools is happening. I mean, it was a major pivot.
But then I don't have Pro Tools, because I use a MacBook Air and it's not big enough for Pro Tools. And at that time, you couldn't even go into an Apple store. I mean, when it closed, it closed.
It closed, yeah.
So then I would have had to not only get a new computer and hopefully get it sent to the house, then learn to use it. My husband was inundated with his work, so he didn't even have time to help me. My son was doing online schooling, so I had to do the best I could. So I knew Twist It Wave, and I did Twist It Wave, and I uploaded it to a WAV file, and I learned, you know, I have an Apogee mic, but I was able to get a soundproofing baffle and a whatever you call this thing, a pop filter.
And she bought extra clothes. She bought extra clothes for her closet
with furniture blankets.
Yeah, I love it. One of the actresses had a giant box that turned into a vocal booth, and you stick your head in it, and there's a mic in there with a little screen. Yeah. And I just thought it was hilarious. But it sounded like a box.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not going to work.
I did blankets, I did furniture pads, I put clothes around, anything. But the hardest part was I'd have to turn the air conditioning down, because once I got in my closet without a ventilation, I started getting warm. And then I would come out and I was like, holy crap, I was in here for 3 hours. I didn't even know it was dark outside.
Yeah. So what were those conversations like when you were casting for this new group of actors and actresses who could, you know, who had recording gear? What was their reaction when you said, oh, we need you to get in your closet?
Well, fortunately, and you can agree with me, Mark, fortunately, we didn't record at the very beginning of lockdown for Mrs. America. So we had a couple other episodic projects under our belt, so we already had a little bit of a learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, the actors, everybody had to pivot.
Yeah.
Everybody had to adjust to the new normal. We also had to cast and ask what kind of recording equipment. I mean, it was that simple.
And
some
internet service, so they could
internet
stream.
service. Yeah, yeah.
That's a whole discussion I know we'll talk about with the mix side of this, but that's the interesting. So the first thing I wanted to do, because my instinct was I wanted to direct the actors and actresses. So I said, let's do it easy. Let's do it over Zoom. So we had Zoom session. Now what's fascinating, which most people won't realize, it's kind of good trivia. So I was curious. I knew there was going to be a delay from me to somebody. What I thought it might be would be a delay for each person would have been slightly differently delayed, but they weren't. So I would do 3, 2, 1, and everyone say pop. And everybody was exactly, from my perspective, exactly the same. And I went, that's fascinating. So I decided to project a picture for those scenes that needed it. So I was the one generating it, and they all saw the picture exactly at the same time. So then they could act against the picture, and they were in sync to my ears. Even though I was hearing them over Zoom, it wasn't perfect. And they weren't, I wasn't recording it. They were recording individually at their houses. But at that point, I could then say, you're too high, you're too low. And I could start directing them based on what I heard over Zoom, which actually worked way better than I anticipated. I think the stress sort of came in, which we had the same problem with the mix. Everybody's got kids working at home, going to school. And so everybody's at home pulling down the internet. We're doing Zoom, so we're projecting picture and it's just weighing everything down. So there were a couple times like, what? I missed that. What? And so there was a little bit of that. So that got a little crazy. Then we broke it up where sometimes we needed crowds and less sync picture. So at that point, we told everybody, okay, take 3 minutes or 1 minute or 30 seconds and do this, and then send it to me. And so we tried every technique we could think of.
Do you remember when we were doing a group of 6 women, somebody's gardener started the blower?
Yeah.
And so as we're recording, we're like, what's that noise? What's that noise? Oh, it's my gardener outside.
Yeah.
But
Old for
so we had
gardener.
to wait for the gardener to stop so that we could all start again. And then he started up again with the blower.
Yeah, all of the joys.
And
well,
also,
we could talk for such a long time, but we are running out of time here. And I do want to get to a couple of other things that I know that we probably have some. I want to leave a little bit of time for question and answers. And I do want to hear a little bit about how did you mix? You can't have all these people in the room together. How did you get client approvals? Was there equipment you needed? Can you just go into a little bit of detail, Scott, on how you got through the mix?
That was really interesting. So little by little, we started, everyone started coming in, but spreading 6 feet apart. But everybody could see was like, someone would clear their throat and everybody would just, So being on the stage became very, very tense. This is the early stages where it wasn't in LA, but we knew it was coming. And then little by little, the client said, maybe I won't come in, or maybe I'll come in only when you need me. And then we started realizing that myself and the music editor, basically the people in the back of the room, it wasn't good for us to be there as well. So we discussed it amongst it as a team. The mixers decided to stay there. They're about 10 feet apart on the mixing console. So they felt good about that. Other than that, everybody was out. We ended up going with a technology called Streambox, where we could stream high resolution, great stereo sound to people's houses. So then there's many, many technologies, but I needed something simple and I needed it today. And I needed it to work on everybody's iPad or laptop because we were streaming it upwards of 10 to 12 people at any given moment. And then what we did was, for those people that have a 5.1 setup here, we sent QuickTimes out at the end of the day so people can listen and take notes on their own schedule. If they wake up early, they stay late. But we constantly were online with the stage in real time. So everybody had Zoom, and the only way we used Zoom was to talk to each other, not to listen. And then constantly we were streaming live the stage. It took a little while to figure out how not to get dropouts and weirdness, but we did. And we were shipping to New York. We were going to Canada. We were going to LA, and we literally mixed not the last episode, but half the show this way.
Wow.
Because while the Waller group was working on 9, we still had to do 5 through 9 because we only had episodes 1 through 4 in the can traditionally. The rest of the show had to be done remotely. And it was interesting. It was definitely a challenge, but we got through it. And the best compliment I got from Davi was on episode 9, I would just say, to the credit of these creative people, wonderful creative people, is that she said, look, I got to tell you, I couldn't tell the difference in the crowds or the Waller group between 7, 8, or 9. They all sounded the same. So I heard what you did and I hear the stories. I just couldn't hear it. And then I'm thinking, yes, that's the goal.
That's a good comment.
That you couldn't tell the difference.
So I have one last question for anyone who wants to answer it, and then we're going to go to some Q&A, I think. But was this the biggest challenge you've come across in your careers, or were there others?
I think this is one of the biggest. What do you think, Mark?
I think so. I mean, I think there's different projects are in terms of technical, how to adjust to the new normal, how to pivot. I think that this was a definite challenge, and we had to prepare and adjust. So I think that was a big challenge. I think each project that we take on is a challenge of itself. talking to Scott about exactly what type of voices when it comes to, like he said, liberal, conservative. That was a challenge, making sure that there's no Bart Simpsons in the room and stuff. That's a challenge. But there's other projects where, we're requested to cast Native Americans who speak a specific tribal language, like for The Revenant, or
I would say, Mark, the Revenant was a very large challenge, but this project before COVID was a very large challenge because of all the women and the.
It's true. I mean, we had to find all these women,
and then COVID.
Yeah.
And
but,
I'll say, go ahead, Mark.
No.
Oh, I was going to say one thing, which was kind of, and I love you guys because you guys helped out so much. So at the very end, I would get weird requests like, "Oh, can we have a guy saying this?" Or "Can we get that?" And I was literally, so Mark probably didn't know it. We're sitting there on headphones, going through it. It's 10 o'clock, let's say, in the morning, and Davi goes, "Oh," or Anna or Ryan going, "Oh, do we have this?" And I'd be like, "No," and they'd be like, "Oh." There's that long pause. I go, "Let me see what I could do," and they're like, "Thank you." And then I text Mark. I'm like, "Mark, I need 2 kids yelling. Okay, Mark, I need a guy saying, Aaron, I need Patty, I need." Oh shit, and I'm sitting there, and they would record it. I would edit it. It would be on the stage 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Sometimes even faster, within 10 minutes. It was so fast that I'd have to say, "Oh, we have the stuff." They're like, "Oh, already?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's all good."
Yeah, Scott would text us and says, "Sounds great. It's in the mix." I'm like, "What?" That's crazy.
We recorded like an hour ago, and it was going. And it is something great because this way of communicating is very fascinating. Because now, even when the pandemic ends, and we have actors and actresses around the world doing other shows, and we need to reach people, and I got producers that are on other shows or living in other places. I do a lot of work with Guillermo del Toro, and I know he's in Toronto a lot. So I have to find ways of communicating with him or the people in Oregon, or even just people in Santa Monica, which is different than people in Burbank. Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting time how we're going to evolve using this technology, whether it's wall groups, playback, people want to sit in.
I think it's going to change. I think even when we get back on a stage, it's going to change how post-production and sound in post-production is being done.
Yeah, very much, very possible. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I would like to offer up some time for question and answers. If I think Jenny's going to pop back in, maybe.
I see the chat thing opened up, and I see there's some questions there.
She's going to, I think, jump back in with that. But if not, I guess we can kind of just run some of these.
I can see that you want to read off.
Oh, Michael would like to know, how did you select the name, the Loop Squad?
Well, when I was figuring out like starting a loop group and all that stuff, I mean, the name's important. And for me, I wanted to put loop in there some way. And so I was thinking like what goes well with loop, and a squad is a squad of people that are coming to the aid of something. That's what I was thinking. So I just thought of Loop Squad, the Loop Squad. And I mean, it was that simple. I was just pondering. There's nothing special about it, but it stuck. So.
Well, I like that.
Good question, Michael. Michael's a very good. He's a good actor, a good looper too.
Yeah, but squad is coming to the aid, so it's like investing.
That's right.
And helping solve the problem and coming to an aid for a project.
And we also like people to come to attention whenever they come on the stage, so they have to salute us. So that's just kidding.
Frankie would like to know, are you still having people record from home, or are you back in the studio now?
Well, we don't really have a lot of projects because at the beginning there was a lot.
And LA just got shut down
there was
again.
a lot of projects that needed to be completed, and they only could do them at home. So right now we don't really have, nobody's filming.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's gonna eventually, it's gonna be a mix. It's gonna be people on the stage and people at home. I think, with the numbers going up, I think, people are thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be getting out of my booth and actually gonna be with people. I don't think that's gonna be happening until we get the okay, but we're adjusting.
I bet the sound alikes will be really nice then at your home at times. Because to do the sound alikes, I know that you do a lot, Mark.
Yeah, especially like if people need me to do a voice match for somebody, it gives me more freedom to take my time, play it back myself, listen to whatever I'm trying to mimic or copy. So it gives me more time. The time really helps. So and with the new equipment we got and with Pro Tools and stuff, there's not a huge difference in terms of what Scott needs if he needs a voice match of something or kids screaming. So, and that's nice because we do have kids screaming at his disposal.
Lucky you, right? So Frankie would like to know, what kind of experience are you looking for? I'm assuming this is directed at the Loop Group, for when looking for more actors.
Patty could probably chime in on this. What kind of experience are you looking for? People who have experience improvising. I think improv and that, I think improv is the most important aspect of Loop Group. Also, when people email us and they want to learn how to get into a Loop Group and stuff, I save every single email. And I ask them what they specialize in terms of vocation. Do they do news reporting? Are they bilingual and stuff? So, if you have a niche, if you have a little niche, that would help a lot when it comes to joining a group, because usually it's that niche that gets you into a group. My niche, when a friend from high school told me about Loop Group and I was an actor and I sat in, I'm like, this is so me, improv and voices and stuff. My niche turned out to be voice matching. So people heard about me, and that's what got me into Loop Group, whether your niche is speaking Spanish or Russian. The experience, the biggest experience would be the ability to improv. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And also, I get people, say, I have this really unique voice. That unique voice is good for if we do Warcraft or something. It depends on what that voice is, but a lot of times you want your voice to stay level, neutral. Yeah.
Neutral.
Gotcha. So Eric would like to know, is it true the word rhubarb used to be muttered during old Walla sessions instead of the Walla?
Walla.
Boy, I mean, this guy's a historical. Yes.
I think that's
rhubarb was.
Question, maybe. I never heard of that.
I did.
I knew that, like, I don't know if you guys realize. So when we mixed this, I actually had two different sets of tracks. I had the blended, let's call it the background vocals. And then I had in the dialogue session, I broke out any of the things that stuck out. So anytime you're any English, it can't be on the effects track. It has to be on the dialogue helper track. So if they want to use it, that's great. But if it goes to another country, that means they need to replace it all in that language, or they have the choice to use what we supply them. So it was always a very interesting balance between, what stood out. But again, so much of this was very specific English that I kind of went, if you want to do it all, if you want to do what we did, knock stuff out,
Okay, let's see. Julie says, hi, Julie Dolan here, voice actor. Hi, Mark. When the whole shutdown happened, I had already been doing VO auditions on a daily basis from my walk-in closet, but my equipment wasn't broadcast quality. So I was one of those actors who had to scramble and update my equipment and get source connected, etc. Now I'm booking jobs and working from home. I work at Keywords a lot and have done jobs for them at home. Yay, we like you. Tomorrow I'm actually going to a studio for a job, but do you see this as a possibility for future work? that we will be doing more and more jobs from home.
Yeah, I do.
I personally, the sad thing is, I don't know that we will know that answer until they start production.
Yeah.
Right.
Because all the television or episodic streaming shows have been shut down and they were completed. So now we're waiting for pilots that got picked up, new series, limited series. Until they start shooting, I don't think we're going to know how they're going to finish them in post-production. I also think until SAG can come to a consensus of how we're going to be working, I don't know. Who knows? So I think it really depends on state, local, and federal government of where we're going with COVID and how like right now we're going backwards. And so, but literally it's until they start production will we know, because we don't have anything to do until we have some material to work on. Do you agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, and I think that most people don't realize. So let's say the day they say we're going to start shooting, the beginning of August. Post-production doesn't start for 3 months. So you got all of August, September, October. If you're lucky, we'll start working in November. But if we don't necessarily, if we're at the height and they don't really start working until October, November, post doesn't really start working until February.
And
so,
yeah, I just think it's great that Julie got advice to any actors right now, any voice actors, obviously.
That's
that
the
she's
TV
working, that she's working.
Gaming is nonstop, you know, because we also do gaming, and gaming, just because the inherent way that they work, has not slowed down. They're all full tilt boogie right now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're about 12 minutes over, so I think we probably should wrap things up. And
I will say hi to Will. Blast from the past.
But any other
else.
questions we didn't get to, I think we could follow up with afterwards. I'm going to hand it back to Jenny, who's going to close us out. Thank you, panelists, all of you, for offering your time and your talents. And it was just really great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for doing the Q&A. I had technical issues trying to get back on there. So thank you all so much, Debbie, Scott, and to the Loop Squad, Mark, Aaron, and Patty. This was fantastic, really insightful. I learned a lot. Thank you very much to our audience for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the session. As Debbie says, we have loads of questions after coming in here, so we will get back to you all personally. So that's it. Thank you all for joining. Take care, stay safe, and we hope to see you soon.